What's up, y'all? It's me again. So lately I've been thinking about one role in RPGs that desperately needs to be redefined in the current video game space. Y'all know what roles are, right? DPS, tank, and healer act as the sort of holy trinity for RPG games, especially ones that are multiplayer oriented. Damage dealers are the most simple and most popular role in just about any game that you can think of. I think a lot of that has to do with the general simplicity of just wanting to hurt something. You're playing a video game and you want to see a boss health bar go down, it's pretty simple. Little variances and mechanics can be added to either classes or characters to give the player options in how they want to do that damage. Ultimately speaking though, the goal is the same. If you're playing a video game with any combat in it, odds are you need to do damage. Tanks are the big, hard-to-kill anchors of the group. They typically have abilities to divert attention from other party members, and they typically walk into any combat scenario with confidence. As the self-proclaimed president of the Big Stick Committee, tanks are typically my go-to role in any scenario that I'm allowed to pick them in. I like big stick, I swing big stick, and the capabilities of the class add to the pathos for why you would want to pick one. And then there's the healer, a necessary part in many games. Its job is to undo damage taken from the entire team. It's the least popular option in any game, likely due to the lack of satisfying mechanics. You keep people alive to do the job that you want to do, and in this way you're simply the hype person. Let me say it again so you get the point. You are the hype person. That's all that the healer is good for. And there are people who fit into this role and quite like it, but there's a reason the role is so unpopular. And I would like to maybe throw some suggestions in there to see if maybe we can fix it. Make it more engaging and more liable for people to pick up. Because it needs to be more than just by the numbers undo the damage that was done to your team. It has to be engaging and fun to play, and maybe even gratifying if we can help it. So let's get to talking about it. First things first, I got a couple things to say. The topic of this video is strictly talking about healers. I understand that the wider support role is its own thing, and that a healer class fits into it, but specifically for the purposes of this video, we're talking about how the act of being a healer needs to be fixed. I'm liable to say most supports are fine, and they widely don't need to change how they work. The second thing is, I'm not going into a lot of detail for the other roles because I just don't feel like I need to, but as I recorded this segment of the video, I found a really good video today by Eddventures who proposes a good idea for a fourth role. He goes into detail about how some of the other archetypes work throughout video games as a whole, so if that's what you're interested in, then you'll find the link in the description. So roles have been an important part in video games since RPGs first existed, and as time has gone on, all three of these primary roles have seen unique iteration seemingly with each new game that comes out, all seemingly except for the healer. Again, the healer role kind of turned into the support role as time went on, but nonetheless the act of healing remains as sort of a weird and almost vestigial system. I have a couple reasons for saying this, and going in order, the first one I would like to touch up on is more or less just the lack of satisfying gameplay found with the healer role. You're not taking chunks out of health bars. You're not perfectly parrying enemies' attacks. The best you get is the occasional thanks from your team, whether or not they're real players. And see, that's another thing. Part of the satisfaction from healing is the appreciation, or at least I feel like it is anyway, and that's not even guaranteed. Maybe you're playing with randos and they don't feel the need to type out a thank you, and given how a healer role is supposed to be healing the team typically constantly, a lot of the times it's more trouble than it's worth for the other party members, so you know, that sucks. The final issue I have with healers primarily is that it's kind of hard to get into the pathos of being a healer. What do I mean by this? I'll use a tank analogy because it's the one I understand the best, and DPS can get kind of weird and wishy-washy and super diverse, so I just won't do that one. But think about this for a minute. As a big boy tank, you find glory in combat by basically being the hardest thing in the room to kill, or at least you're supposed to anyway. You kind of revel in the glory of being a meathead, and taking that on its face value is its own reward for being in the mindset. The best thing I can equate this for healers is that maybe you are sort of a group caretaker, or you really like the idea of being a caretaker, which is completely valid, but that just doesn't fit very many people who play video games in general. Now that we've established some of the core issues with the healer role, I want to maybe try to get some suggestions in here that might serve as good food for thought on the matter. Primarily just ideas on how to fix the issues that I have with it. Let's start with the catharsis issue. Brainstorming some ideas together, me and a couple other people came up with two pretty good options that games can use to sort of fix how healers work. The first one being some sort of stacking effect with heals that you get. Say you're playing the healer role and every time you heal somebody, you gain +1 to some sort of stack. The stacks will ultimately make your healing more efficient, but if you want to, you can consume the stacks for a single powerful attack, or something akin to it. Maybe it can also be a part of a large AoE heal that's super strong or something. just so it stays in the role. This has sort of the obvious issue of maybe it leans too much into the damage dealer role as well, but obviously the preface of it requiring you to do your role's job first means that it kind of counteracts this just a little bit. The other idea is basically just make it to where anytime you throw some sort of healing ability at an ally, it also does like a tiny splash of damage to an enemy. Make it to where it does something like just not cause stagger to that enemy and instead does a little bit of damage. In this way, it could make something like low-level farming or something much more efficient even though you are just a support character. It still speeds up the process but doesn't take away from the healing aspect. And who knows, it might even prove to be useful if you underestimate something. Now ultimately you could vouch to use either one, both, or neither of these systems if you think you have a better one. Again, I kind of just want to put the thought of trying to make this role more engaging in people's minds because I kind of feel like it needs it. I'm aware it's not necessarily a big issue. If the role does what it needs to and it does it competently, then it's obviously fine. This isn't some sort of end of the world scenario where it needs to be fixed immediately or anything. But again, if it could be made better, then why not make it better? But I want to know what y'all have to say about it. Do you have any suggestions? Or maybe you think healers are fine as they are? And hey, while you're at it, maybe subscribe and join the Patreon, that'd be cool too. Alright, I'm out of here. Y'all have a good one.
What the fuck?
And I stand by that statement after what just happened.